So now we're moving to chapter 2/33 where we start introducing the concept of trade and the advantages of trade. Before we do so, we just want to run through a simple example trying to see the implications of two different individuals and their production possibilities on their own. And then we will see with this simple example, we will expand on it and we will see what are the trading possibilities and the possible gains from trade. So to start off, let's just see what are the key things happening here. Well, in this example, we have two players. We have a farmer and we have a rancher. And we have two goods that each of them could produce. They could either produce meat or vegetables or a combination of the two. And we assume that they work 8 hours a day. So from here, what we need to know is what are their hourly or daily output. So on an hourly basis versus on a daily basis, this is if they do 8 hours of that. These are their production possibilities. So the farmer could produce either 1 unit of meat or 1 unit of vegetables, and the farmer could produce either 3 units of meat or 2 units of vegetables. So there's very important here is the or sign is that you can't produce both within that hour. If you have 2 hours and you're the farmer, of course you could produce 1 unit of meat and 1 unit of vegetables because you sacrifice 1 hour producing meat and 1 hour producing vegetables. So on a daily basis, all I've done here is I've multiplied each of these by 8, and these gives us our possibilities. So let's just retranscribe this. So on a daily basis, per day, I said if I'm the farmer, I could produce either 8 units of meat or 8 units of vegetables. And if I'm the rancher, I could either produce 24 or 16. Okay. So to represent this, since we're only dealing with two different goods, it's very easy to represent it in a two-dimensional graph. I could set both of them separately on two different graphs, but actually I will set them up on the same graph here, just so that it's easier to compare them. So I have here my meat production, here my vegetable production. Why I chose to have meat on the vertical axis and vegetable on the horizontal axis, it's just a question of preference. It doesn't really matter here because you're representing the relationship between the two production possibilities. And if I look here, what's my maximum for the rancher or the farmer in terms of meat? It's 24, so I want to make sure that 24 is accessible within the graph. And what's my maximum here for vegetable? If I want to have a similar grading scheme, so let's say here this would have been 8 and 16 roughly 3 equal segments. And here, let's say I keep the same distance, 8 and 16, and I would have 24 here. This is very roughly done, but it gets the picture across. So what we're going to look here is what's the production possibilities frontier of the farmer look like? Well, if the farmer, one of his options is if he sacrifices all of his time producing meat, he will produce 8 units of meat while producing 0 units of vegetables. If he produces only vegetables, he will not produce any meat and he will produce 8 units of vegetables. Okay. I will argue that the production possibilities frontier is a straight line between these two. So this straight line here is my PPF, my production possibilities frontier, for the farmer. Why is it a straight line between the two? Well, in this situation here, our allocation or the amount we could produce of each is strictly dependent on how we allocate our time. So if I spent 7 hours producing meat and 1 hour producing vegetables, well, this option here of producing 7 units of meat and 1 unit of vegetable is possible. If I produce 6 hours of meat and 2 hours of vegetables, I'll have 6 units of meats, 2 units of vegetable. So I could see that for every time I want to increase my vegetable production by 1, I need to drop my meat production by 1. So the slope here we'll come back to this, but this slope here is going to represent my opportunity cost or my trade-off of producing one more vegetable. So if I want to produce 8 more vegetables, well, I give up 8 units of meat. If I want to produce 4 units of vegetable, I will give up 4 units of meat. I have this one-to-one relationship in this specific example. If I look at the rancher now, well, his options is 24 units of meat if he produces 0 veg, or if he produces 0 meat, 16 units of vegetable. Therefore, the straight line here would be the production possibilities frontier for the rancher. Okay. So we could see they're not necessarily the same place. They're not crossing. For that, there's no worries yet. We're going to see all the implications of this. But once again, I could see that here I have a certain trade-off. And here my trade-off seems to be larger. Because if I want to go from not producing any vegetables to producing 16 units of vegetables, I can't give up this one-to-one relationship like the farmer had. I'll have to give up 24 units of meat to get 16 vegetables. So I'm giving up more meat per vegetable. So I have a larger trade-off in terms of meat lost per extra vegetable produced. That's going to have a big implication. I'll come back to that later on. So my opportunity cost, as mentioned a second ago, is that slope of the production possibilities frontier at a certain area. Here the slope, since the lines are straight or linear, we have a situations with nice straight linear lines that the slope will always be the same. Okay, so here between meat and vegetables. However, we could have an example where the slope could look something like this. The production possibilities frontier between good X and good Y could have this kind of shape here. And this is why we say that the opportunity cost is that slope at a certain area. So if I'm looking at the opportunity cost between this point here, point A, to this point here, point B, well, I'm looking at the slope here. That's the important part. But if I was interested at the trade-off between these 2 points, well, the slope is naturally flatter here, and that's going to have different implications as well. So my opportunity cost is the slope of the production possibilities frontier at a certain area, but with a straight line, linear production possibilities frontier, the slope is always the same. So whether I'm here or here or here, I'm always going down at the same slope. If you look at this and this is a mountain from the side view and this was a ski run, well, naturally the steepness of the ski run is not changing. Whereas here, you're not going too fast and gradually you're going like, whoa, this is getting pretty steep here. Okay. All right. So if the farmer and the rancher choose to be self-sufficient in this case, in terms of production, well, in this specific example, the production possibilities frontier of each individual is actually also his consumption possibilities frontier. So if we were to look back to here, if I'm the rancher or if I'm the farmer and I'm not trading, we're doing both our own things, we're on our own end of the island, we're not seeing each other, we're not communicating with each other. Well, if I'm the farmer, it's not possible for me to say, I want to consume 6 units of meat and 6 units of vegetable. This point here, as we've seen in previous analysis of production possibilities frontier, is a point which we would say is infeasible for the farmer. Okay. The rancher, on the other end, he could produce more than 6 and 6, so this point here would actually be inefficient. Okay. So we have this situation that you're limited by what you can produce in the absence of trade. So the next topic is, are there any possible gains from trade? So we're going to look at some of the big concepts of trade theory, and through that we're going to go through some examples and try to see how we could calculate trading agreements or trading terms of trade kind of levels, and what are the potential gains from trade. How will this consumption possibilities frontier possibly change due to some trade going on between 2 different individuals or 2 different countries.